Sudan, in the heart of Africa. It's a story of oil profits, slavery, and a savage civil war. Yesterday, a special fact-finding mission reported that Canada's largest independent oil company, Talisman Energy of Calgary, which has oil drilling operations in Sudan, is, in effect, helping Sudan's government suppress a rebellion. But Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy, who commissioned the report, has decided not to impose sanctions on Talisman. That decision has disappointed human rights groups and earned Canada a sharp rebuke from the U.S. State Department. With us tonight, Georgette Gangnon, an independent human rights field investigator and a member of the government's fact-finding mission to Sudan. And in Ottawa, Senator Lois Wilson, the foreign minister's special envoy to the Sudan peace process. You were, Georgette, as we suggested, a key member of this team that was over there in December investigating what was going on at the minister's behest.
Yes.
What's Talisman doing in Sudan specifically that you believe is contributing to the government side in this war effort?
Well, some of its infrastructure, such as an airstrip, is being used by the government of Sudan to attack civilians who live in and around the oil fields. And the purpose of these attacks is to displace them and clear them out of the oil-producing areas. Of course, it must be realized that these civilians are considered the enemy in the eyes of the government of Sudan because they're Southerners. And so they are seen to be supporters of the other side in the civil war.
Senator Wilson, you're not part of this John Harker team that went over to Sudan, but you are the minister's special envoy for the area. Do you support the conclusions that this report, which Madame Gagnon helped write, do you support those conclusions?
I didn't do the investigation, so I'm not sure if I support them or not. What I do support are many of the minister's responses to those recommendations, one of which is that we'll use the IMF and the UN and the World Bank to monitor how the profits from the oil are used.
All right, let me just back up for a second then. The airport, I understand. Are there any other things that the government is doing?
Well, Senator Wilson raised the issue of the oil revenues, and that certainly is another way that many people think that Talisman is contributing to the civil war. The revenue from oil production is the argument is it's being used to fuel the war and to actually allow the government to fight its war, buy better weapons, better tanks, that sort of thing.
You talked to Talisman about this?
Yes, we did. We spent 3 days with Talisman at their oil production site, and we learned from them that in fact they did know that their airstrip was being used by the government of Sudan for military purposes.
And you told them what you thought about what they were doing. What did they say to you?
They said that they had told the government of Sudan to stop that, and that it had, and that the government started again, and they told them to stop, and that was the last that we heard of it. However, I know that Minister Axworthy has written to the government of Sudan about this, and I think has heard back that the government of Sudan is not using that airstrip anymore for military purposes, but I suggest that needs to be independently verified.
Okay. Senator Wilson, what do you want to see done here?
Well, I think that the whole issue of peace in Sudan is much broader than oil, although oil and water are two of the key components. What I found out when I was over there is that there is an attempt by the Africans themselves to bring peace to Sudan, and Canada's in a supporting role only. We're part of an international team. Canada is not going to bring peace to the Sudan, and although oil is central to it, it's not the only issue.
But do you see Talisman as being a block to peaceful potential over there right now?
I'd say no. I think it's certainly implicated in the sense that no company is going to operate in the country without the government giving its okay, which means complicity immediately. But apart from that, if Canada were out, I think France would move in, and if Talisman were ever going to sell, which I guess it isn't now that it's making profits.
But there's complicity and then there's complicity. So how?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So Georgette, how complicit is Talisman now in the fact that there's an ongoing war there?
Well, some would argue that the fact that some of their infrastructure and the facilities they built is being used in the war primarily against civilians, is a form of complicity for which some sort of liability and responsibility must attach. Some say simply being in business with a government that is a notorious human rights abuser, and giving that government a sense of legitimacy and doing business with them is another form of complicity.
But is Senator Wilson right in that the second we leave, somebody else is in there right away?
I'm sure that will be the case.
I'd like to say also that one of the key issues in the war is the issue of whether Sudan will remain a united state, and it's whether it will be a secular state, which is anathema to Muslims, or whether it will be a theocratic state. It's, you know, the relationship between religion and the state is a key issue between the North and the South.
Maybe since you've raised it here, Senator Wilson, we should go into this a little bit more. This is a horrible civil war which has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Well, no, more. 1 to 2 million dead, actually.
That's
it's
right.
Between North and South, different religions, different factions. Can you, fill us in a bit on this?
And also Arabs and Africans.
Yes.
So, I mean, there are a lot of disparities. Basically, I think it's a failure to share wealth and power. But what pleases me is that the African states see it as a regional problem. They've involved most of the African neighboring states now. Egypt has brought forth another initiative, which we hope will be rolled into the what they call the IGAD process, which is managed by Kenya and the neighboring states there. So they don't want to buy Western solutions for an African regional issue, and Canada supports those efforts financially.
But as Lloyd Axworthy's peace missionary in that area, if you like, are you on anybody's side in this thing? Are we supporting one side over the other? Should we be?
We're supporting the Africans who are trying to broker a peace agreement. I mean, it's not easy when you've had a civil war for a long time and there's no quick fix.
Okay. Georgette, let me ask you this. We asked Talisman to be here tonight. They have declined our invitation to be here. However, editorials, all of the newspapers, you heard on the radio today as well, they're making the case. This is just a company. It's not a government. They don't have the same obligations to do what a government has to do. What's your take on that?
Well, it is true that under international law, it is certainly not clear what the legal obligations and liabilities are of companies, which are also called non-state actors. However, I would argue, and many would argue, that companies have an ethical obligation to respect human rights and to do business in a way that doesn't hurt people.
Do you think Talisman believes that?
I hope it would. It has signed on to this international code of ethics for Canadian companies.
You visit their website and they show you all the wonderful things they're doing in the country, right?
Yes.
Hospitals they're building and so on.
Yes, but on the other hand, that development, although very good, is small in comparison to the need there, and some would also argue it's very one-sided, and it's only being delivered to people who support the government of Sudan.
Lois Wilson, let me get you on that too. What is the obligation of Talisman in this situation? Is it the same as a government's, or are they just a company and their job is to make money?
Well, I think that the whole relationship between human rights and trade has never been sorted out by the Canadian government or the Canadian people, for that matter, and Talisman is only one example of that. But what I'd like to say also is that we better not forget we also are bringing this matter before the Security Council of the United Nations. And we also have the Commission on Human Rights in Geneva, where the international community will come together. So it's not as though we're taking no initiatives.
Understood. Can you, Georgette, tell us, let's get into some of the recommendations that your report put forward. You say Talisman has got to acknowledge that it's in a business with a government that systematically abuses human rights. Are they prepared to acknowledge that?
To date, from what I read in the newspaper today, they have not acknowledged that, in fact, the government of Sudan is committing human rights violations. I also know that they still have not acknowledged that any of the incidents that we mention in the report actually happened. They still disagree or reject those factual conclusions that we made.
You want them to tell the government of Sudan as well that it disagrees with what it's doing.
Yes,
are they prepared to do that at all?
Yes, we do. I don't know if they're prepared to do that. I haven't heard them say that they are going to do that.
The foreign minister disappointed, our foreign minister disappointed a lot of people today by saying he wasn't going to bring sanctions in against this company. He's got the U.S. State Department upset with him. He's got church groups and other thoughtful people in this country upset that he's talked the talk, but he hasn't walked the walk in this case. You think he's made his final ruling on sanctions in this case?
I would hope not. However, in his statement yesterday, he did not say that he would revisit the issue of sanctions. But I would hope, and I'm sure human rights organizations would hope that should Talisman not do some of the things that the government suggests it do, that it would look again at the issue of sanctions or taking action in a number of other ways, because there are other pieces of legislation in Canada which the government and Talisman as shareholders may be able to use to get Talisman to ensure that it respects human rights obligations.
Senator Wilson, do you think will you have Lloyd Axworthy's ear on this? Have you told him you're disappointed that he didn't bring in sanctions?
No, I haven't told him that, because the people who want sanctions, I always ask them what kind of sanctions, what's possible, what are the legal instruments we have at our disposal. I'm quite sure if there are concrete suggestions about things that we might do, he would be open and he would revisit. But at the present time, they seem to have met a wall.
You think he's gone far enough?
As far as he can go at the present time. I don't think he's got a closed mind on the issue. But sanctions rolls easily off our tongues. What's meant exactly? What is possible? I mean, the sanctions against South Africa were internationally imposed. They were asked for by the people within the country. So what are we talking about when we call for sanctions in Sudan?
Senator, we're hearing a word used in this part of the world that you don't hear used very much anymore.
What's that?
Slavery. Can you paint us a picture of what kind of slavery is going on over there?
The word that is used over there is abductions. And my information was that there are two kinds of things going on. One is the kind of abductions that take place between the tribes in payment for a debt or so on, and that's been going on since time immemorial and will likely continue into the future. The more serious thing that's going on is some key people have now commercialized this whole thing and are making pots of money over it. And the government of Sudan is unwilling to prosecute them, that is, to make them criminally responsible. And I think at some point that has to happen.
Georgette, did you see evidence of slavery when you were there in December?
Yes, we did not see evidence of slavery ourselves, but we did meet with many people who were intimately involved with these issues. And yes, it's called abduction, but as we say in the report, at the end of the day, it's a question of semantics to some extent.
Right. But are people in this for life? They get abducted for life, and that's
some
for life?
People get abducted for life. Others are redeemed. Others are used to work. Others are women are used for sexual purposes.
Senator Wilson, you look like you want the last word on this. Go ahead.
Well, many young girls are put into forced marriages.
Yes.
There's an attempt to reunite children with their parents, but I was told there were some parents who've been looking for their children for 10 years.
Yes. That's true.
You sound like you've got your work cut out for you, Senator, in that part of the world.
I think so.
Thanks for coming in tonight to talk to us about it, both of you. Senator Wilson, Georgette Gangnon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Later on Studio 2, Ontario's Women's Institutes. More than a century of public service.
Some of the comments made by the men at that time was, oh, well, let them have their meeting. They won't be able to carry on because they'll soon all be fighting and it will break up.
Up next, the Chinese refugees seeking freedom or a career in crime.
On every ship, there's going to be an X amount of people here coming here for the sole purpose of becoming a gang members.
If you look at the numbers we're looking at, I mean, it's a percentage of what happens at Pearson in a week, you know, but the story's gotten so much coverage simply because there's a dramatic shot for the media to take.